A few years ago, I was picking up a new pair of glasses, and a couple weeks earlier, I had gone to get my eyes examined, and the optometrist said I needed a new prescription, new lenses. So I took that opportunity to also get a new set of frames that the salesperson said would make me look younger and more hip. I thought, now that's a tall order, but anything's worth a try. But when I sat down that day, a couple weeks later to try on my new glasses I had ordered, everything was very blurry and out of focus. I took them off and put them back on again, and the salesperson said, "Is there something wrong?" And I said, "Well, honestly, I cannot see a thing through these glasses. I know these clearly make me look young and hip, but I just don't know if it's worth it if I can't see." She said, "Well, wait a moment." And she took the glasses and disappeared into a back room, then came back out and handed me what appeared to be the exact same pair of glasses, which I then tried on. And as if by magic, everything was in perfect focus. And she said, "Is that better?" I said, "Yeah, I can see fine just now." "How did you do that?" She said, "It's a secret." I said, "No, really, what'd you do? Because I'm feeling like you've just played a weird magic trick on me or something." Finally, she admitted, "Well, okay, that first pair of glasses was for somebody else. I picked up the wrong ones, but these are your glasses." I said, "So you're telling me that there's going to be someone else running around town wearing these same glasses, looking as young and hip as me?" She said, "Oh, no, that's not possible." I said, "You are good." On my way home, I considered what I might say if I happened to meet that person who's also running around town wearing that first pair of glasses I tried on. I could always compliment them on how young and hip they looked. But then that took me down a trail of thinking how fascinating it is that two people could be wearing identical frames but have vastly different lenses to see the world through. Now, these days, we're experiencing some differences in perception that are affecting all of us in some profound ways. And I think it matters that people like you and me, people of faith, are not only aware of our own set of lenses, but that we try our best to listen to and understand how and why others can see and hear the same things that we do, but have completely different perspectives on what it all means. Because one of the essential things I believe that we're called and that we're compelled to do in our daily lives is to put that faith of ours into action, which of course is never easy and it's never risk-free. It's not easy to have conversations that might make us feel uncomfortable, but to actually engage with friends and family members and neighbors. It takes a lot more courage to talk with people in ways that are peaceful, grace-filled, and loving than just to decide to block someone we disagree with from our Facebook profile. It takes patience to be open to hearing, to be non-judgmental, to try to walk a mile in someone else's shoes. And it takes faith to believe in a promise of something that's bigger and better that we cannot yet see. So, just as an example, let's run down a very short list. Just a couple of items from today's headlines. The climate crisis, global warming. Now, some understand that as a true crisis, while some continue to perceive it as either a myth or that the science on it is not conclusive. But what's undeniable, though, is that sea levels are rising. That's an objective fact. Last year, an iceberg the size of New Hampshire and Massachusetts combined broke off of Antarctica and is melting in the ocean. And it's undeniable that weather patterns all around the world have changed, that widespread droughts are now stretching into decades. It's predicted with some certainty that within 8 years or so, most of New Orleans and most of Savannah, Georgia, will be underwater at high tide. By 2050, The same will be true for Manhattan, Miami, Atlantic City, Seattle, and San Diego. Scientists agree on these things. This is not a conspiracy to frighten us. They're just telling us the facts as they see them. Millions of people will be displaced, and the economic cost will be higher than anyone can possibly measure. We will all suffer no matter where we live. The only way to mitigate this will be a massive shift right now to renewable energy, stopping CO2 emissions, and changing our diets away from methane-producing animal products to plant-based foods, which would also have the added benefit of improving our health. So that's the lens I see things through, and yet I know so many others who see our planet and the future of our children and grandchildren very differently. It's all just too abstract for them, or it's too big of a problem, or it's simply for the next generation to try to figure out. Okay, so let's now talk about critical race theory, also known as CRT. All over the country, angry parents are showing up at school board meetings, and state legislatures are passing laws demanding that kids not be taught things that they believe, the legislatures believe, are designed to make them, the kids, feel guilty about being white. They believe kids are being indoctrinated to despise our country, and that CRT is a socialist plot. So that's one lens that a lot of people are seeing this through. Another lens is that critical race theory was an area of research that developed in the 1970s to try to understand why in the world, after landmark civil rights legislation was passed in the 1960s, African Americans still had difficulty getting mortgage loans, or could not live in certain neighborhoods, or were living in gerrymandered congressional districts where their votes effectively didn't count, or they were tried and convicted at far higher rates than white people who were accused of the exact same crimes. Those researchers wanted to know what was going on. Could it be there were institutions in our country, banks, the court system, with a long-held institutional racial bias in spite of all of those civil rights laws? Yes, those questions from the world of academia eventually filter down into curriculum for public schools. And yes, perhaps those questions cause students to wonder if America was truly living up to its aspirations as a country where all are created equal. Thing is asking that question unpatriotic? Does it make you a socialist or a troublemaker or a brainwasher of innocent minds to suggest that people of color might not have the same opportunities as white people? Is anyone really surprised about that? Does it diminish white people in any way? Isn't questioning and trying to fix things that are unjust and broken a civic duty and a moral obligation? It's kind of like a t-shirt I saw recently. Equal rights for others does not mean fewer rights for you. This is not pie. Now, those are just two examples, and I know full well that they are issues that have become highly politicized, unfortunately. So for someone like me to speak about them in a church setting, that might strike some folks as inappropriate. Keep politics out of church, I've been told. But I'm merely using those things as examples of how two people can see the very same thing and perceive them very differently. I could name several more divisive issues, but we just don't have time. What's clear is that we are lacking something. When you have opposing sides to any issue believing that the folks who don't agree with you are irredeemable and stupid and not worth talking with, and only worthy of your scorn, and your goal is to utterly defeat them, well, my question is this: have you really solved the problem that lies at the heart of things? I once had this conversation with a friend who disagreed with me. He brought up the example of Nazi Germany, how that was a state system of tyranny and oppression and racial hatred and mass murder, after all. So he asked me, are you seriously saying we're supposed to sit down with Nazis and try to listen to them and understand their point of view? Because their point of view was morally wrong. Plain and simple. Good point. But no, that's not what I'm suggesting. Sometimes no other option exists but to subdue the forces of evil so that they can do no more harm. But then, you still have to do the hard redemptive work of listening and understanding why and how such evil could arise in the first place to make sure that it doesn't repeat itself. So, why not today, while we still have the chance, do that work now? In our families, in our neighborhoods, among the people we encounter every day, why not listen to learn what is at the root of things? Now, I hate to sound simplistic, but the one factor I consistently see behind the issues that divide us is so very simple but so very powerful. It is almost always fear. Fear of change itself, fear of losing something, economic security, some perceived place on the human pecking order, the fear of a lost ideal, the fear of a lost promise. So, how do we listen, understand, and help transform that fear into hope, even if it's only one person at a time? The Old Testament story where God comes to Abram in a vision, it's really not a bad blueprint for us. And in that tale, Abram's at the end of his rope. His whole future depends on his ability to have a son to carry on his name, to fulfill the promise that God made to him many years before. Abram gave up his home, his land, his security to follow that dream, that promise. But years have passed, and Abram's not getting any younger, and he's angry, and he is afraid. So in this vision, God takes Abram outside on a starry night and says to him, "Look toward heaven and count the stars, if you're even able to count them." Then God said to him, "So shall your descendants be." And from that moment on, Abram's fear dissipated. He had shifted from looking through the lens of the immediate pressing issue to the big picture, the huge array of stars in the night sky, to imagine what could be. It was a paradigm shift from seeing things one way to another way, from focusing on himself to widening his field of vision from horizon to horizon. His fear was then overcome by hope. And you and me, we're already called and compelled to possess that very big perspective of hope. We are emissaries of hope, and the world needs us to know and trust that in the wideness of God's mercy and the loving intention God has for every life, we are never created to live in fear, but always in hope. So listen, understand, and point up to the sky of a promise that is more powerful than any fear. The promise and the truth that we are all in this life together, and that we're riding through the starry universe on this little blue marble created for us to take care of. That is a far bigger and more wonderful perspective than anything, that we can live in peace and we can change the world, one hopeful person at a time.